Ken was in his early 20s when he was busted for a very small amount of drugs. These days, no one would have paid attention, but in those days, in the 1990s, he was sentenced to 5 years in prison. He was very upset at the time, thinking that he was wasting his life. So he joined the inmates firefighting team and within a few days was sent to Malibu, California to fight one of the biggest fires they had had in years. Now in Malibu, you have the beach down here. This is where all the movie stars live. Then you have Pacific Coast Highway. And then a big cliff goes up to the wildland area up above, and that's where the fire was. Ken was sent to the very top of the cliff, taking care of a long ladder that the inmates put up to save people who were fleeing from their houses. They was told by the captain, you can't go up in there because it's certain death. You've got to stay on the cliff and wait for the people to come. But Ken saw the corner of his eye, someone moving around, probably 40 or 50 yards up in the smoke, in the fire, and decided that they needed help. And he went into the fire, disappeared. Many moments went by. No one knew what happened, and suddenly he reappeared with a woman in his arms. And she was panicked, she was screaming, but she was safe. He got her back to the cliff face. She was still screaming. The story didn't end there. Ken's story, and many like it, are in my new book, Michael Bowker's No Ordinary Days. It's a collection of the most provocative stories I did in my career as an investigative journalist. Many are about the heroic and spectacularly brave things that people have done, but some of the stories are very dark. I covered a lot of true crime. I got a little too close to a serial killer. So those stories are in there as well. But let me get back to Ken's story right now. He's on the cliff. He's with a woman who is still screaming, and he finally is able to hear what she says because they're away from the fire and there's a little less noise. She is saying to him that her son, who is autistic, was separated and is lost in the fire above. And right there, Ken has to make up his mind what to do. He's told by his fire captain not to go in there. He turned to the woman and said, I will not come back without your son. And he runs off up the pathway, into the smoke, into the fire. He's gone for a long time. His team thought that he had probably perished. And then, like a movie scene, like a movie set, the fire seems to part, the smoke seems to part, and Ken comes striding down with the son by his side. Their clothes are smoking, but they're safe and sound. But the story doesn't end there either. Ken went back to prison. I did the story for Reader's Digest. We had a couple 100 million readers at the time worldwide. And I didn't talk to Ken again for 20 years. I got back in touch with him this summer because for every story I've done for the book, I've decided to go back and talk with everyone I had interviewed in the first time around to find out what had happened in their life since the time I did this story. I've tracked Ken down through social media. He was living in Northern California, and when he found out it was me on the phone, he broke down and cried. And he said, I've been trying to reach you and talk to you for the last 20 years. And he says, you're not going to believe what happened. He said, everybody found out about my story, what happened on that cliff, including the governor of California, who gave me a pardon immediately. And I didn't serve the last 4.5 years of my sentence. At the same time, I got an offer from head of a company that was worldwide. And to this day, 22 years later, I run their computer systems all over the world. He says, I have a wonderful house. I have wonderful friends and family. And I also, and he says, this is the best part, I also am invited to talk to school children once or twice a month. And I tell them, no matter what has happened to you in your life, no matter what happens to you in the future, you will always have a second chance of having a beautiful life. That's what I call the ripple effect. One person does one positive thing and it ripples out. Harvard did a study on this and proved it, and that is in the book, that if you do one positive thing, it ripples sometimes for decades. But the ripple effect is a through line theme of the book. It's a tremendous thing that I wish was taught in schools. If you like strong, provocative, true stories, I hope you'll like No Ordinary Days. And just remember the ripple effect. It's cool.